I'm Sarah Chin, and I learned early that being the youngest meant being invisible. My older brother Marcus got the business mentorship from Dad. My sister Victoria got Mom's social connections and country club memberships. I got the leftover bedroom in the basement and the clear message that my existence was an afterthought. Sarah's just not business-minded like Marcus, Dad would say at family dinners as if I wasn't sitting right there. Some people are built for success. Others aren't. Mom was worse. She'd introduce my siblings with pride. Marcus runs 3 car dealerships, and Victoria married into the Hartford family, and then get to me with a dismissive wave. And Sarah does something with computers. I was a software engineer at a Fortune 100 tech company. I'd been there 8 years, working my way from junior developer to senior systems architect. My salary was $240,000 plus stock options. But to my family, I was the disappointment who played with computers instead of doing real work. The real tension started when Grandma Helen died and left me her estate. Not all of it, just the part she'd set aside specifically for me. The primary residence went to Dad as expected. The vacation property in Vermont went to Uncle James. But Grandma had maintained a separate trust worth $2.3 million, designated solely for me, her brilliant granddaughter who sees the world differently. The will reading was a nightmare. "This is ridiculous," Victoria snapped when the estate attorney read the trust provision. "Sarah doesn't need that much money. She doesn't even know what to do with it." Marcus leaned forward. "There must be a mistake. Grandma wouldn't have given her the entire investment portfolio." Dad's face was red. "We need to contest this. Helen wasn't in her right mind those last few years." Mom dabbed her eyes with tissue, playing the grieving daughter. "Sarah probably manipulated her. Grandma was so vulnerable." I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap. Grandma Helen had been sharper at 92 than most people at 50. She'd built that portfolio herself, starting with $50,000 from selling her first business and growing it over 4 decades. She knew exactly what she was doing. The estate attorney, Mr. Vaughn, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Chin was absolutely lucid when she established this trust. I have medical documentation and witness statements confirming her mental capacity. The trust is ironclad." "We'll see about that," Dad muttered. What my family didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask about, was that I'd taken Grandma's early lessons to heart. While they saw me as the family failure, I'd been building something substantial. Grandma Helen had taught me about investing when I was 16. Not the basics, the real strategies. Asset allocation, compound growth, tax optimization, risk management. She'd given me $5,000 to start my own portfolio and made me report back monthly on my decisions. "Money isn't about how much you make," she told me during one of our Sunday afternoon sessions in her study. "It's about how much you keep and how smart you make it work." By the time I was 25, I'd turned that $5,000 into $47,000. By 30, my personal investment portfolio was worth $380,000. At 33, I'd crossed $1 million. I lived modestly. A nice but unremarkable condo. A 7-year-old Camry. I saved 60% of my income and invested aggressively but intelligently. I'd diversified across index funds, real estate investment trusts, and carefully selected growth stocks. But more than that, I'd learned to read people and patterns. I'd learned to see what others missed. And I'd learned that sometimes the best strategy was to be underestimated. When Grandma got sick, I'd visited her 3 times a week. Not because of the inheritance, I didn't know about that, but because she was the only family member who'd ever actually seen me. We'd talk about markets, about life, about her regrets and my dreams. "They think you're weak," she'd said during one of our last conversations. "That's their mistake, not yours. Never forget that, Sarah." 6 weeks after the funeral, Dad's lawyer served me with papers. They were suing me for the entire $2.3 million, claiming I'd manipulated Grandma Helen through undue influence, mental coercion, and exploitation of a vulnerable elderly person. The lawsuit was filed in probate court 3 months after Grandma's death. My parents had assembled an aggressive legal team, 3 attorneys from Hartford and Brighton, one of the most expensive firms in the state. Their complaint was 47 pages long. It claimed I'd isolated Grandma Helen from her family. Manipulated her medications to create confusion. Forged documents and signatures. Coerced her into changing her estate plan under duress. Stolen family heirlooms and cash. Every allegation was completely false. But they were counting on the optics. Grieving parents, concerned siblings, and the weird youngest daughter, who'd somehow gotten the money. The local newspaper picked up the story. Family alleges elder abuse in $2.3 million estate dispute. Mom gave a tearful interview about how heartbroken they were to discover what I'd done to Grandma. My phone exploded with messages from distant relatives, former friends, even old colleagues. Everyone had an opinion. Most assumed I was guilty. I hired an attorney, a solo practitioner named Rebecca Torres who specialized in estate litigation. She was half the price of the Hartford and Brighton team, but she had something they didn't: actual integrity. They're going for intimidation, Rebecca explained during our first meeting. Big firm, multiple attorneys, aggressive discovery. They want you to settle just to make it stop. I'm not settling, I said calmly. Good. Because we're going to destroy them. Rebecca and I spent 4 months building our defense. But more than that, we built our counteroffensive. Here's what most people don't understand about litigation, Rebecca explained. Discovery goes both ways. They think they're going to dig through your life and find dirt. What they don't realize is that we get to dig through theirs. We submitted interrogatories, formal written questions they had to answer under oath. We requested documents, bank statements, tax returns, communication records, every interaction they'd had with Grandma Helen for the past 10 years. And then we waited. The documents started arriving. At first it was standard stuff. Then Rebecca noticed something. Sarah, look at this. She spread 3 bank statements across her desk. These are your mother's accounts. See these withdrawals? $15,000 in March. $22,000 in June. $18,000 in September. All marked loan from Helen Chen. I leaned forward. Grandma was loaning Mom money? Not just your mom. Look. More statements. Dad had borrowed $43,000 over 2 years. Victoria had taken $67,000. Marcus had borrowed $31,000 to expand one of his dealerships. None of them had paid any of it back. Rebecca's smile was predatory. Your grandmother was funding their lifestyles. And they were treating her like an ATM. We kept digging. Rebecca hired a forensic accountant, a retired FBI specialist named Donald Park who'd spent 20 years tracking financial crimes. What Donald found was stunning. My parents had power of attorney over one of Grandma's accounts, a checking account she used for monthly expenses. Over the past 3 years, they'd written themselves 47 checks from that account, totaling $186,000. The checks were marked for caregiver expenses and medical supplies. Except Grandma had full-time professional care through an agency, and her medical expenses were covered by insurance and a separate medical trust. The money had gone to my parents' country club dues, Victoria's kitchen renovation, and Marcus's boat. This isn't just a lawsuit defense anymore, Donald said quietly. This is embezzlement. Elder financial abuse. Potentially criminal. Rebecca looked at me. How do you want to handle this? I thought about Grandma Helen. About our Sunday afternoon sessions. About her teaching me that strength wasn't about being loud. It was about being prepared. We go to court, I said. And we let them bury themselves. The courtroom was packed. My entire family sat on one side. Mom, Dad, Marcus, Victoria, Uncle James, Aunt Patricia, and a dozen cousins. Their 3 attorneys occupied the plaintiff's table with stacks of binders and folders. On my side, just me, Rebecca, and 3 bankers' boxes of documents. Judge Morrison entered. She was 60-something with steel gray hair and a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. We're here for Chin Family Trust versus Sarah Chin, she announced. This is a probate dispute regarding the estate of Helen Chin, deceased. Counsel, your opening statements. The lead attorney for my family was Richard Hartford himself. Senior partner, Harvard Law, $800 an hour. He stood with practiced confidence. Your Honor, this case is about a pattern of manipulation and abuse. The defendant, Sarah Chin, systematically isolated her grandmother, exploited her vulnerability, and coerced her into diverting $2.3 million away from her rightful heirs. We have witnesses who will testify to the defendant's unusual control over Mrs. Chen's final years. We have evidence of suspicious changes to estate documents. And we have a family devastated by betrayal. He spoke for 12 minutes. It was polished, emotional, and completely fabricated. Judge Morrison turned to our table. Miss Torres. Rebecca stood. Your Honor, will keep this brief. The plaintiff's claims are entirely without merit. Mrs. Helen was a brilliant businesswoman who made her own decisions with full mental capacity. We have medical records, witness statements, and documentation proving this. More importantly, we have evidence that will demonstrate exactly who was exploiting whom. She sat down. 60 seconds total. Hartford looked almost offended by the brevity. Call your first witness, Judge Morrison said. They called Mom first. She took the stand in a black dress, playing the grieving daughter. Hartford walked her through a carefully scripted testimony about how I'd taken over Grandma's life, pushed the family away, and clearly influenced her decision-making. Mrs. Chin, Hartford said gently, can you describe your mother's mental state in her final year? Mom dabbed her eyes. She was confused, forgetful. Sometimes she didn't even recognize us. It was heartbreaking to watch. And yet she apparently had enough clarity to make Sarah the primary beneficiary of a $2.3 million trust? Exactly, Mom said, voice breaking. That's how we know Sarah manipulated her. It was a good performance. I watched several people in the gallery nodding sympathetically. Rebecca's cross-examination was surgical. Mrs. Chin, you testified that your mother was confused and forgetful. Is that correct? Yes, Mom said sadly. Yet you also had power of attorney over one of her accounts, correct? Mom hesitated. Yes. To help with her expenses. Rebecca approached the witness stand with a document. This is a check you wrote from your mother's account on March 15th for $8,000. The memo line says, caregiver expenses. Can you explain what that covered? I don't recall the specific expense. That's odd because your mother's professional caregivers were paid directly by the care agency. Their records show no gap in payment. Rebecca handed her another document. Here's a check for $12,000 dated June 3rd. Also marked caregiver expenses. Where did this money go? Mom's lawyer objected. Relevance, Your Honor. I'm establishing the financial dynamics between the plaintiff and the deceased, Rebecca said calmly. Highly relevant to claims of exploitation. Overruled, Judge Morrison said. Answer the question, Mrs. Chin. Mom's face was flushed. Those were for additional help. Private care. Can you provide receipts or documentation for this private care? I'd have to look for them. Rebecca smiled. We'll wait. She couldn't produce them. Because they didn't exist. Rebecca continued. Mrs. Chin, you also testified that your mother sometimes didn't recognize you. When did this alleged confusion occur? Her last 6 months. Interesting. Because we have medical records from Dr. Patricia Arnold, her primary care physician, showing regular cognitive assessments. Every single one shows your mother scoring in the normal range for her age. No signs of dementia, no cognitive impairment. She submitted the records. Judge Morrison reviewed them, her expression darkening. They called Dad next. Same script, grieving son concerned about Mom's mental state, shocked by my manipulation. Rebecca destroyed him in 8 minutes. She presented bank records showing the $43,000 in loans he'd never repaid. She showed email correspondence where Grandma had explicitly asked for repayment, and Dad had promised next month for 18 consecutive months. Then she dropped the bomb. Mr. Chin, did you tell anyone at the bank that you were your mother's financial guardian? Dad shifted uncomfortably. I may have mentioned I helped manage her affairs. You told the branch manager you had full financial authority. Based on that representation, the bank allowed you to make withdrawals from her investment account. Isn't that correct? I was helping her. You withdrew $23,000 from her investment account without her knowledge or consent. The bank's internal investigation, which we subpoenaed, shows no authorization signature from your mother. Hartford was on his feet. Your Honor, this is beyond the scope. This directly addresses the plaintiff's claims about who was exploiting Mrs. Chin, Rebecca said sharply. We're entitled to show the full picture. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. Continue. Marcus and Victoria's testimonies followed the same pattern. Each one tried to paint me as manipulative. Each one got eviscerated on cross-examination with their own financial exploitation. By the lunch recess, their case was falling apart. After lunch, it was our turn. Rebecca called our first witness, Dr. Patricia Arnold, Grandma's physician of 22 years. Dr. Arnold, can you describe Mrs. Chen's mental state in her final year? Absolutely sharp, Dr. Arnold said firmly. We performed regular cognitive assessments. Her memory was excellent. Her judgment was sound. She was in complete control of her faculties until her death. Was there any evidence of confusion or impairment? None whatsoever. In fact, she joked about it. She said she wanted to stay sharp enough to manage her portfolio and keep her family honest. Rebecca smiled. Did she ever express concerns about family members? Hartford objected. Hearsay. State of mind exception, Rebecca countered. Directly relevant to her testamentary intent. I'll allow it, Judge Morrison said. Dr. Arnold nodded. She told me she was worried about her children's financial management. She said they treated her like an ATM machine and never learned to build anything themselves. She wanted to make sure at least one grandchild understood the value of real work. Rebecca submitted Dr. Arnold's complete medical files. Next, we called Donald Park, the forensic accountant. Donald presented his findings methodically. The unauthorized withdrawals. The loans that were never repaid. The pattern of financial exploitation spanning 3 years. In your professional opinion, Mr. Park, was there evidence of elder financial abuse? Absolutely, Donald said. Classic pattern. Family members with access gradually increasing withdrawals, using vague justifications, never providing documentation. Total amount extracted, $186,000 plus the unpaid loans brings it to $367,000. The courtroom went completely silent. Rebecca turned to Judge Morrison. Your Honor, we'd like to submit one more document. He handed me a folder. I stood and walked to the judge's bench. My hands were steady. My voice was calm. Judge Morrison looked at me. Ms. Chen, you've been patient through these proceedings. Do you have something to add? I opened the folder. Inside were 3 items. A complete accounting of every withdrawal my parents had made from Grandma's accounts. A report from a private investigator showing Marcus had lied on his dealership loan applications, using Grandma as a phantom investor without her knowledge. And a memo from Grandma Helen's estate attorney, written 1 week before she died, explicitly stating that she was of sound mind and wanted to protect her assets from family members who never learned the difference between earning and taking. I looked at my mother, at my father, at my siblings who'd spent years making me feel worthless. The judge asked, "What is your response to your family's allegations, Ms. Chen?" I said 2 words. Forensic audit. The courtroom erupted. Mom's lawyer actually dropped his pen. It clattered on the table, loud in the shocked silence. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Explain. Your Honor, I said calmly, I'm requesting a complete forensic audit of my grandmother's accounts for the past 5 years. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every check. I want to know exactly where the money went and who benefited. Hartford was on his feet. Your Honor, this is a fishing expedition. It's a response to their claims of financial manipulation. Rebecca interjected smoothly. They've accused my client of stealing. We're entitled to show who was actually taking. Judge Morrison's expression was ice. I'm inclined to agree. Mr. Hartford, your clients have made serious allegations. They've opened the door to a complete financial review. Dad's face had gone pale. Mom looked like she might be sick. Furthermore, I continued, I'm prepared to show that while my family was exploiting my grandmother financially, I was the only one helping her build her portfolio. I have 3 years of email correspondence discussing investment strategies, market analysis and financial planning. I have records of the Sunday afternoons I spent with her. And I have her own words in multiple documents, explaining exactly why she chose to leave me that trust. I handed the judge Grandma's final letter. Judge Morrison read it silently. When she looked up, her eyes were hard. This letter, dated 1 week before Mrs. Chen's death, explicitly states her reasoning. She writes, Sarah is the only one who understands that wealth isn't given, it's built. She's the only one who visits me to talk about ideas, not ask for money. She's the only one I trust to honor what I've built rather than squander it. The judge turned to my family. Does anyone dispute this is Mrs. Chen's handwriting? Silence. Your Honor, Rebecca said quietly, we also have security footage from my client's building showing her regular visits. We have phone records. We have witness statements from Grandma's caregivers, all of whom will testify that Sarah was the most frequent visitor and never once asked about money or inheritance. Hartford tried one last time. Your Honor, this doesn't change the fact that the distribution was unequal. Because she earned it, Judge Morrison snapped. From what I'm seeing, Miss Sarah Chen was the only family member who wasn't treating Helen Chen like a personal bank. She looked at the documents spread before her. The evidence of my parents' exploitation. The medical records proving Grandma's competency. The letter explaining her reasoning. I'm ready to rule, she said. Judge Morrison didn't hesitate. After reviewing the evidence presented, I find the plaintiff's allegations to be completely without merit. Helen Chen was of sound mind and clear judgment when she established the trust for Sarah Chen. The medical evidence is overwhelming. The documentation is thorough. Her reasoning is explicit and rational. Hartford started to speak. Judge Morrison held up a hand. Furthermore, I'm deeply troubled by what this case has revealed about the plaintiff's own conduct. The evidence suggests a pattern of financial exploitation of the deceased. While this court's jurisdiction is limited to the probate matter, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential elder financial abuse charges. Mom gasped. Dad's hands were shaking. The lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. The trust distribution stands as written. Additionally, I'm awarding the defendant attorney's fees and costs in the amount of. She checked Rebecca's filing, $47,000. Your Honor, Hartford tried. I'm not finished, Judge Morrison said coldly. I'm also imposing sanctions against the plaintiffs for filing a frivolous lawsuit. $25,000, payable to the court within 30 days. She looked at my family with obvious disgust. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Chen, I've been on this bench for 19 years. I've seen family disputes over money countless times. But I've rarely seen such brazen hypocrisy. You exploited your mother financially for years. And when she had the wisdom to protect her assets from you, you accused the one person who actually cared about her. Mom was crying. Not the performance tears from earlier, real humiliated tears. This case is closed. I hope you all take time to reflect on what you've lost here. And I don't mean the money. The gavel came down. The courtroom cleared slowly. My family left through a side exit, avoiding eye contact. Hartford and his team packed their materials in silence. Rebecca squeezed my shoulder. You did it. We did it, I corrected. Outside on the courthouse steps I checked my phone. 17 messages. Most from relatives who'd sided with my parents, now trying to distance themselves. One message stood out. It was from Dr. Arnold. Helen would be so proud of you. I smiled. The local newspaper ran a different story this time. Judge dismisses estate lawsuit. Refers case for criminal investigation. Mom's tearful interview looked pretty stupid now. 3 weeks later, the district attorney did file charges. Mom and Dad were charged with elder financial abuse and fraud. Marcus faced additional charges for the fake investor documents. I didn't celebrate. I just felt tired. The money from the trust went exactly where Grandma Helen intended. I invested most of it using the strategy she taught me. I donated $200,000 to the Alzheimer's Research Center in her name. And I set up a scholarship fund for first-generation college students studying finance. 6 months after the trial, my portfolio, combining my own investments with Grandma's trust, crossed $3.8 million. I still drive the same Camry. I still live in the same condo. But now, when I look at my investment dashboard, I think about those Sunday afternoons with Grandma Helen. They think you're weak. That's their mistake, not yours. He was right. My family thought I was stealing from them. What I was actually doing was protecting what someone who loved me had built. And in the process, I learned that the best revenge isn't dramatic confrontation. It's living well. Building something real. And knowing that you earned every single piece of it. Mom and Dad settled the criminal charges with a plea deal. They paid restitution and received probation. Marcus lost his dealership when the bank pulled his credit line. Victoria got divorced. Turns out her husband didn't appreciate being associated with a family under investigation for elder abuse. I haven't spoken to any of them in 18 months. I don't miss them. Last week I was going through Grandma's papers and found one more letter, dated 2 weeks before her death. It was addressed to me but marked open after the dust settles. Inside she'd written, "Sarah, if you're reading this, it means you won. Not because you fought, but because you were prepared. I taught you about money because I wanted you to be free. Free from people who take. Free from family who sees you as a resource instead of a person. The trust wasn't just money. It was proof that someone saw who you really are. Build something beautiful with it. And remember, the best investment you'll ever make is in yourself. Love always, Grandma Helen." I framed that letter. It hangs in my office, right next to my Series 7 license and CFP certification. Because Grandma was right about one more thing. I wasn't just her granddaughter who played with computers. I was her legacy. And that's worth more than $2.3 million ever could be.